Step beyond the veil and into the unseen, where intuition deepens, energy flows, divine and spiritual guidance is received, and your inner wisdom unfolds. Whether you're beginning your journey or expanding your gifts, this podcast offers grounded guidance to trust your intuition and live in alignment with your soul. I'm Mariana, holding space for you to remember who you truly are, an infinite star. Hi everyone, welcome to episode number 3 of the Infinite Star podcast. My name is Mariana and I am an intuitive psychic and Reiki practitioner, and I'm holding space here with you to talk about something that has been predominant in my life, which is signs that have appeared in my life. And by no means, I'm going to share a few instances, but by no means this means this is an exhaustive list. I thought about some important parts of my life or pivotal moments in my life where I requested signs and the universe delivered, and I was ready and receptive and ready to hear what the universe had to say. And I want to share those stories with you. And perhaps I want to start by saying that signs have been very predominant in my life, even when I was very religious, and this was not necessarily something you were taught. Perhaps, you are, in the Catholic religion, I should specify, maybe through prayers, right? But it's, I don't know that this is a practice where you say, okay, God, give me a sign. Maybe it is. I don't know. But it's something that I really was open. And the more intuitive and the more spiritual that I became, the more that these signs were visible. And I say that because signs are everywhere. Our spirit team is always ready to give us and provide that information. All of us have spirit guides. All of us have perhaps ancestors, people who we loved or loved ones who passed, who are ready on the other side to help us, angels, etc., etc., etc. And, whenever they're there to continue provide us guidance in the universe outside, God, universe, source, however you want to call it, are there to help you in your journey. And it's just a matter of asking and being open to receive. And so I'm going to share with you a few instances that by no means is an exhaustive list of situations where I asked for help, and situations that I think were really important in my life. And so far, or as far as I can recall, because I'm sure there are many, I recall asking for signs since I was very little. But these examples really, to me, are a testament of a few things, right? Like the first is that when you're ready to listen, signs appear everywhere, and the more perceptive that you are to listen, the more clear, or the clearer the signs are. And hopefully this resonates with you. And my hope is always that it doesn't only resonate with you, but that you get curious, right? That I ignite that little fire or that, curiosity in you to ask and start utilizing these resources and infinite knowledge that it is available to any of us and all of us. So I'm going to start with, I can go as far as when I was little, but I think I'm going to share, I think it's about 4 signs in 4 different times in my life that, during pivotal moments where I was like really looking for direction, and I felt lost, or I was in a situation where I really needed guidance, and the universe spoke very clear. Imagine, and I almost want to say for each one of these, I felt as though I asked for a sign. You look up to the sky on a cloudy day, and then all of a sudden, the clouds open and you see the sun and the rays of the sun coming right through you and speaking to you. That's literally how these signs felt, and provided, most importantly, direction for where I was going and what I was going through. So one of the first ones that I recall is I had, when I grew up, in high school, I actually had a boyfriend, and we were together on and off, like good youngsters. and I'm making myself feel old when I say that way. But I had a high school sweetheart, and we were together, and I loved him. And I thought, for a long time, we thought we were going to be together. We actually forever and ever, as you always think. And we actually talked about plans for retirement, and we were like having all these plans, and we saw ourselves like growing all together. I mean, this is how much we loved each other. I think we were together for about 4 years. And the story goes that we graduate high school and we sort of go a little bit on different paths. To me, it was very clear that I wanted to go to school. To me, it was extremely clear that I wanted to study abroad. And that is another whole story for another podcast. But I wanted to go to school and I wanted to study abroad. And to me, that was clear. It was a non-negotiable, and I didn't necessarily see myself doing those things with him, but I knew that they needed to happen, and somehow it was going to work out. So when we graduate, I actually took a year of college, and I around that time, I believe, is when he decided to, without consulting me, and well, let me say this, he didn't need to consult me, but at least I think I deserve the right, or the courtesy to hear about it before he actually did that. But he went on and signed to the Air Force and sign up for not 4 years, 6 years. And that's a pretty big decision. And not only that, but he also signed up for active duty, which means he was going to be traveling and be, placed in different places. And so we're having this conversation, and I'm like, oh my God, like, well, what are we going to do? And somehow in my heart, I just knew things were going to be okay. And, that I was going to move forward. And so he was really, I was a little upset, but I wasn't necessarily super mad. I was just like, okay, whatever, you made that decision. I just know that I'm going to go to school. And he knew that was important to me. So he had it all planned out, and he actually proposed that, he wanted to, because he was going to be placed abroad, he actually said, well, where would you want to live? And I wanted to live in Europe. It was clear to me that I wanted to live in France. And for those who know me, know where that went. And I ended up actually living in France anyway. So he was like, well, why don't I ask to be placed in Germany? And I was like, okay, that's amazing. That's great. Maybe I can go to school, right, when you're there. But, as we're, planning all these, our future, we realized that I can't travel with him unless we get married. And so he is like, well, why don't I wanted to, was thinking about it. I think we should get married. And contrary to what people might think at that point, I was like, there's no way I want to get married. Yes, I love you, but I'm not ready at all in any way, shape, or form. And so I was like, that's not what I want. And I knew my heart was like not aligned with that idea. And I said it many times, and he was like, well, but that's the only way. If you want to go to school, your tuition will be paid. And I don't know what else, for the wives of people who go to the Army or Air Force. He was in the Air Force. And so I was like, all right. And, and I knew I was not aligned with that idea, but I knew that, in the way that I saw it, and he actually convinced me, was that I felt that I needed that in a relationship, there are lots of compromises, and that it was my turn to compromise. And so I said, well, maybe it is time for me now. And eventually in the future, I might get a job somewhere and you're going to have to move there because of me. So anyway, he ends up convincing me, and so I agreed to marry him, even though against my whole will. I just knew it was because we wanted to be together, and not necessarily because I wanted to get married. It was just to make sure that we ended together. And so he convinces me. He goes to a boot camp somewhere in Texas, I think, and it's so hard for him. I mean, I truly feel like it was really hard days for him. He would call me every day, almost like, well, I'm not going to say this, but maybe crying, or just, it was just really hard. And I'm sure, right? Like, they break you and they make you, and I don't know what else. But so he graduates, I go to see him, and we're super excited. I'm already seeing myself like, okay, we're planning our wedding. We had absolutely no money. I don't even know how we were going to do that, but I picked the place. I already knew where I wanted my dress. Anyway, so I go to see him in Texas, and yes, we confirmed that we love each other, and we were apart for like whatever many months. I think it was 3-4 months when he was in boot camp, and we're like, we love each other, and yes, this is the right decision. And in my mind, I was okay. I'm going to go, to school in Germany somewhere. I don't even know why we thought about Germany, but Anyway, so come back to Connecticut, which is where I used to live, and he comes back from boot camp or from graduation, and we're super excited. And he actually tells me that he's coming back on Saturday, but he ends up coming back on Friday or a day before, so he surprises me. And of course, we're super happy. He comes home with like flowers, and we're all like ready to actually, start moving on to all these plans that we, had talked about. And so, anyway, that night we're super happy, we go out and we're super, I miss them and we like love each other and lovey dovey. Next day we have a mega fight, but like I'm talking like a fight of like I hate you and I don't know what we're doing, and questioning the whole world, even though we've been together for like all these years and we had all these plans. And and I was mad and pissed and all of that, but I wasn't necessarily ready to break up at that point. I had made up my mind, and I was convinced that we were going to get married and all these plans. And then he delivers the news, babe, I'm not ready. I don't think I want to get married. I don't know that I ever want. And I was like, wait a minute. Last time I checked, you're the one who was convincing me. Like, how did we get to this? And not only when I was like, okay, well, were in agreement because I didn't want to get married either. And he's like, no, but I actually don't think we should be together. I think we should go on a break. And I was like, what? And that's what, obviously I was so lost, and I was like, where is this coming from? And I was so, I really wasn't, I did not understand why he had arrived to that conclusion. And I get it, neither of us, maybe he made that realization after the fact, but it was like he didn't say anything until that point or after that fight. And I was like, okay, all right. And I was like literally in shock, because it's like I've been sort of waiting and for you and taking up all these, you signing up without telling me and then convincing me and all these things that I knew were not aligned and, in my heart. And so anyway, that night, we get into this mega fight, and I'm like, are you sure you want to break up? And he's like, he just was like cold. I don't know where that was coming from. And the only thing that I could conclude eventually was that maybe he was cheating. I don't know. Didn't feel like it, but you never know. So anyway, I am like, as I'm realizing, and I'm getting like, my heart is bumping harder as I remember that moment, because it was actually really tough. And so anyway, we leave, and I just start driving like crazy, and I think almost irresponsibly, because like I was mad. I didn't know what to think. I was like, I wasn't ready to break up. Like, what, at that point I was convinced, like all these plans. And I just like stop. I don't even remember where, but I start driving aimlessly and perhaps much faster than I should have, not in a safe way. And then I stop at a parking. I don't remember, but I just stop. And my car used to have a how do you say this? You could see the, oh my goodness, I forget what it's called, but when you look up to the roof and you could see through, rooftop. No, that's something else. Anyway, so I open it and I'm looking at the stars, and I'm literally, I cannot tell you to what extent I felt lost. Like I was like, now where am I going to do, right? Like, because it's just, there's so many, obviously looking at it from now, nothing had happened. My life hadn't changed at that point. It was just that I had prepared myself to, and I was convinced and all these things. So I look up to this guy and I'm like, God, because at that point I did call a God. I said, God, give me a message that this is going somewhere where, like right. I don't even remember how I posed the question. And, at that point is when I started hearing signs via songs. On the radio, all of a sudden, the song La Vie en Rose, which is the Life in Rose, I think it's a correct translation in French, comes up. And it was almost like a quiet moment where my guides brought me to hear that song. And I felt this peace in my heart saying, there's something better. There's something for you. And and it has to do with friends. I don't know how I heard it, but that song just brought me so much peace. And eventually I didn't see it then. I just knew, okay, I didn't know what that meant in any way, shape or form, but I did know that things were going to be okay. And I wasn't focusing so much on the fact that the song was French. To me, it was like, sure, it's a love song. That's all I know. But it was about knowing that, I listened, I heard, and I knew it was going to be okay. Long story short on that, and maybe another podcast, I ended up going to school. I ended up, college. I finished. I went, I studied abroad, and I tried everything to go to France, because I always wanted to learn French. And the universe brought me to Spain, and that's where I met my ex-husband, who I shared many, many years. We are, obviously not married, but we were extremely happy until we weren't, but everything ended in very good terms, and he's still a very good friend of mine. But all that to say is that at that point, it was like La Vie en Rose. Obviously, it's a French song, and universe is telling me, look ahead, because it's what's coming. It's amazing. And I just knew it. So that's one instance where I really was like, wow, universe, as I looked back. And at that point, I just knew peace and something about France. I didn't necessarily know that it had to do with me meeting someone. I just knew it was like something I needed to trust, and that it was going to be okay. So that's sign number one, at a pivotal moment in my life, and a moment that really helped me get over that, because it was really tough. I broke up with him, and closing the story on that boyfriend, he actually left, and he ended up getting stationed in Germany, and he regretted everything that he did. He started like trying to get back to me, and I think he ended up with a girlfriend, like he really fast. And I was like, of course not. Are you crazy? Like he tried to say, like, at some point, I think he had a girlfriend, and then I found out, and then he was trying to get back to me when he was in Germany. And I was like, your chances are over, my friend. They were over a long time ago. And even when I moved to Spain to study, he was actually trying to get in touch with me. So to say, obviously we got over each other and all, but like he really regretted it, I will say. And not to make me feel better in any way, shape, or form, because I don't think that was the case. But it was like, my life could have been really different if he hadn't had that. I don't know. In French, they say when you like a cable like breaks in your brain and you just go a little crazy and berserk. And I think my life would have been in a very different place. Anyway, so second sign, fast forward, I'm married, and I'm happily married, and I moved to France, and I didn't speak a word of French, and it was an amazing time in my life. I mean, obviously moving to a different country is difficult, no matter how beautiful the country is. It was a different language. Granted, it's a Romance language, so very similar in a structure way, really similar to Spanish. And so it was, in a way, much easier for me to learn versus someone who speaks, for example, Japanese, right? But I had to learn. I had to start over. I had fought so hard for school and my career, and, I had this great position, and then I ended up moving there, and I had to start over. But I worked really hard, and for the first 6 months, I started studying French really, really hard, because I knew that I wanted to continue doing what I was doing in the US and work-wise. And for me to do that, I had to learn French. So anyway, so I'm in France, and I feel comfortable. I find this, amazing jobs. I will say I worked really, really hard. And I had the opportunity to have amazing jobs. In fact, I had one of the most important jobs. And this is how I got there. So the first jobs obviously are a little different than what I was doing. But my first job, I think I was in a language school. I was selling languages. I sold English was the language that was sold the most. But the amazing part is that I did it in French. And the first company that after 6 months of studying French, I felt more comfortable to, throw myself and start working. And the first company that believed in me was a language school. So I'm really and will always be thankful. And thanks to that, I actually met one of my lifelong friends that I love. Anyway, so I'm progressing, and throughout my time there, I keep climbing in the work. I get promoted, and then I went back to doing what I was doing. And anyway, so I get to a point where I used to manage properties, and I get to a point where I am where I was, and super proudly, in French, fully French. And it gets to a point where I'm hitting a wall. It's, I felt like I wasn't growing, and I was ready to, find a job that better aligned, a bigger property, etc. Anyway, so I start looking for jobs. And I will say I was really lucky because I speak 3 languages, and in France and in Paris specifically, if you speak English is really sought after, and Spanish obviously as well. And then if you speak French well, then you are, it's easier to find a job. You're competing with less people, if you will. And so at one point, so I decide to grow and I start looking for jobs, and I apply. And it's one of those times where like months happen and I just wasn't, I was getting interviews for jobs that were similar to what I had, and what I was looking for was to grow. And I just tried, and it's just, one time, one rejection after the other. You know how that feels. You start like, no matter how confident you are, you're like, what is happening? And so at one point I, start reflecting on the fact that perhaps it has to do with my last name, right? Like maybe there is racism, let's be honest, everywhere. And in France is not, it's not the exception. And so I was like, well, maybe I have to change my name. Maybe I should put my ex-husband's, at that point, my husband, his last name, and it might sound more French, and maybe it's a fact that I am Latina, or like it's my last name is very Latino sounding, and maybe just people are being, I don't know, prejudiced or just straightforward racist. And maybe this is what I need to do to do that next step. And so at that point, the signs that I asked, it was during my 20s and a little bit of my 30s, signs came through so loudly through music, through songs. Like I knew that I was like, I need a sign. And then the song, I knew I had to pay attention at the moment, or at a given moment. And so I ask for a sign and I say, universe, give me a sign. Should I change my name? Is that something that I should do to find a job? And right away I hear this song from Sting, if you ever heard it. An Englishman in New York. I'm an alien. I'm a legal alien. I'm an English. And there's a phrase that says, don't believe what they say, like be who you are. I can't recall exactly, but it started with that phrase. Basically, you know who you are and be who you are, no matter what, no matter where you are. And I think that the whole point of that song is that it's an Englishman in New York and finding all these differences, but ultimately you need to be yourself. And I was like, oh, and it makes me cry when I think about that, because it was such a pivotal moment of doubting about who I was and being validated and accepted by other people for, and no offense to my ex-husband's last name, right? Actually, I thought about that long and hard. When we got married, should I take his last name? And I actually didn't, because I was like, no, unless he takes mine and we make it like a hyphenated, didn't happen obviously, but I was like, no, you know what? It's not my last name. And even if it was, if I get hired automatically, or maybe it's not me, like, right, it's not going to be aligned with who I am, because it's not what I want to do. I wouldn't be changing my name because I want to, because it comes out of my heart, right? It's because I'm trying to get something. And I was like, no, I'm going to, it's going to be my last name. I'm going to continue having my last name. And it is, and so it is. And so soon enough, I get these the most amazing job I had. At that point, it actually was that one was a pivotal moment in my life for one of the most important jobs I've had. I actually had the opportunity to work for the Minister of Defense of France, Interior and Justice, and I was probably the only foreigner, let alone Mexican American. Many French were confused, especially because my accent is a little bit of French and a little bit of Spanish, a little bit of English, and they're always like, where are you from? But when they hear my last name, guess what? They know I am definitely Latina. So anyway, that was amazing. I ended up having this job that was like, great. I mean, in terms of responsibilities, in terms of the goals that I was looking for, in terms of the growth, and my colleague, former partner, we ended up being really good friends. And long story short, I introduced him to one of my really good friends. They got married, they had a daughter, and I'm the godmother. So all that to say, it was the right place for me. I mean, was it intense? Yes. I worked with the unions. It made it extremely intense. I mean, I think at one point I had people going on strike. But anyway, that's derailing. Anyway, so that was, and I just looking back, I was like, I'm so proud. And I am, at that point I was Madame Martinez, like Madame Martinez, Madame Martinez. And to the point where actually my staff used to think that my ex-husband was Mr. Martinez. So the household was, oh, Monsieur Martinez is here. And it was funny. And he never corrected people. He got a kick out of that. But yeah, so that was like a really clear sign that, hey, no, be who you are. And I heard it. And till this day, that makes me cry a little bit because that sign was so powerful. Like, you need to not doubt about who you are, and things will align, right? So that one was another sign. And another one that, so this happened in France as well, where I felt really powerful, that really, I would say, directed my way in the way that I described the other two signs, but it sort of taught me, or showed me the way to where I was going to go and where I ended up spiritually. Actually, I think I mentioned this several times. I grew up Catholic and really extremely Catholic. And so I'm in France, and my brother, actually, one of my brothers passed away when he was really young. He was about 18. And ever since, when I could, in the Catholic religion, you can actually ask for a mass. You pay for it, obviously, and then they pray for the person that, your loved one who has passed. And so I once in a while would do that. And I was in France, and I remember I paid for a few ones around the time. I don't remember if it was his birthday or around the time he passed, but I wanted to pray for him. So anyway, I do that. And, obviously this is in France, the mass is in French. And I think at that point I wasn't 100%. I mean, I was sort of getting French or not. And so I pay for it. And then I, go to the mass, and I'm waiting for his name to be called, and his name is not called. So I'm like really disappointed. And I go to the church person, and the priest, the church person, the priest at the end. And I said, hello, Father, I paid for, and the priest just looks at me like, oh, it's okay, my dear. You just need to pray for him, in your mind. And I was like, that's not the point, but at that point I was like, no, if you pay for it, the least that you can do is actually mention his name, or can I come back and do it another day? And this memory kind of gets blurry because what's important is not that, but I go back again, and I think I paid for a few, and I go again, and I'm already disappointed because they didn't mention his name. And that's the whole point of, paying for the mass and going there, or at least that's how I felt. Obviously praying, it's not dependent on paying for mass. But anyway, so I go again, and once again, they don't, we get to the end of the mass, doesn't mention his name, and I'm just mad. And at that point, I think, obviously, I'm going to make it sound like that's the one thing that made it happen, but no, it's sort of like what culminated in my doubts and in my already wishes to start discovering other religions, or not religions, but other philosophies and other ways of thinking. And I already started getting really curious. I was already reading a lot of Buddhism, and so I started getting curious more than anything. And then I remember I was sitting, and I'm like boiling, and I'm thinking like, why, they didn't say, and I'm upset. And then I say in my mind, oh, let me set the stage. So I was wearing, I don't know, I think the mass was really early in the morning, and I went with my workout clothes, and I had a hat, the Nike hat, if you like Just Do It. With the Just Do It, actually, it was a gift from my little brother that I had for years. It was destroyed, but I still had it. Anyway, so because of mass, I took it off and I put it next to me. So anyway, I'm like boiling mad at the end because his name was not mentioned. And I asked for a sign, and I said, I'm here at church, I'm sitting down, I'm very, obviously very spiritual, and I do believe, and I'm not questioning the higher source, but should I, and I can't remember exactly how I asked the question, but I asked the universe for a sign. Should I discover or look for different philosophies or different religions, and or should I, just find other thoughts of forms of spirituality? And I am told, or I feel like somebody guides me. I look to my left and I read my hat that says, just do it. And I was like, thank you. And I just knew it was a sign. Like, I just knew it was a sign. And ever since then, I started, reading more about Buddhism, meditation, and my world expanded to where it is now. I am not confined. And, again, all due respect to all the people who follow religion. To me, it's a way that constrains ways of thinking, etc. But I have very strong. Well, I have my opinions, and I respect others. But that brought me to things that I would have never imagined. And obviously, you would have told me, you're gonna say you're psychic 10 years from now. I would have been like, you're crazy. Psychics is like has a really negative connotation in the Catholic religion, etc. But that was, really was that sign was what brought me to discover new philosophies, new worlds, and to be really, to reach a level of expansion where I am, and where I've been able to reach, and how I've been able to continue helping others, which probably would have not happened had I stayed in that, in the religion that I was following. So that one was a pretty amazing sign that really sort of pivot my life, or brought me to the path that I needed to follow. So that's number 3. And I'll say the number 4 one, which was a really amazing one. That one was another one that it took months for it to make sense. But the sign was like, I just, at this point in my life, and this happened not long ago, I already know you ask for a sign, you listen, even if you don't know the full answer. If you receive the sign, trust it. Like, trust it, and you'll know it. How do you know when you're not, how do you know when you're tapping into infinite knowledge and infinite wisdom? Is when you just know, and you can't question. You don't know how or why, but you know it. So I went through, and I don't know if I should get really, really deep into that, but I'll try to summarize it. But I have a podcast now, so I can talk forever. And if you're still here, woohoo. So at one point in my life, I have this job that it's an amazing position. It's a C-suite level, and long story short, there it ended up not being a very positive experience, to the point where I had to leave. I had to confront management, and I actually had to bring lawyers. I mean, it was just really not a good time. And, anybody who's gone through that knows how little chances you have of even winning. It's not the word to say, but to feel some type of justice, if you will. But anyway, I'm at a point where I decide, so I leave, and I decide to take some time off, and I find a point in my life where, actually, in retrospective, I knew it was a time where I was like, okay, this is a time that I need to take advantage. So it was a little stressful, obviously, because I didn't have a job, and I had all these like expenses and whatnot. But at the same time, I knew it was a time in my life where I took advantage. And I'll talk about this at a different podcast, where it allowed me to actually pave the path to everything I'm doing now, because I knew I'm not going to have this much time. And then also allowed me to really launch into being an aspiring soloist in flamenco. So I had all of this time with me that I really feel I utilized wisely. But nonetheless, that was a difficult time, and it was stressful, and obviously looking for a job. It's not it's a full-time job, and not knowing where you find it definitely brings a level of stress. And so at that point, I started consulting, which brings a level of income, but I wasn't not the same to where I was before. And so I'm like, okay, I was hoping to do a bit more consulting, and but that wasn't happening. And it got to a point where, okay, I really need to find a job now. So I started looking. And I go through a time where I am interviewing, and I'm getting to all of these C-suite positions, like top 2, top 3, top this. And I went through like 5 different ones, right? And I'm like, I had already invested in finding a job versus like growing my consulting gig, that I was like, now I really need to, what am I doing? And it's one of those times where I'm like, I need to find a direction, right? And I was just so puzzled. Like I am again, like I know I'm getting to people's right, like radar. It's not about my resume. You know how they say, oh, you're not utilizing the right words and the recruiters are not seeing you. No, I definitely was being called, interviewing, no problem. I was getting interviews, no problem. I was getting to top 2, top 3, but was not getting the jobs. And it was like confusing. At one point I was like, okay, what is happening? So finally I lent this interview that, it was like amazing, this really amazing global organization, and doing great work. And it all makes sense because, I mean, the whole position made sense. I mean, it was like, it's everything sort of that I've done, like civic engagement. I mean, so many things. It reunited so many of the things that I've done. And traveling, with the opportunity to travel, and it was like not far from where like you could work from home a few days, and then maybe there was not a rule to go to the office. You could go 1 or 2 times a week. I mean, it was just like a really cool, and you would work with all these countries, and it ended up being an amazing, well, anyway, so I'm like, oh, this is all makes sense. And as I am interviewing, obviously everything goes well, and I mean, if it's just like alignment, like leadership was amazing, like alignment everywhere except the salary. And I was like, oh my god, like what's happening? Like I was like, it had to be like, why is this not, like, why is this not making sense? This is exactly like the kind of dream job that I've been wanting to, working for a global nonprofit and doing all the things that I, doing all the things that I've done, and being able to apply all the things that I know, and then also being able to speak the languages that I speak. And so anyway, so I leave the interview and I'm puzzled because I'm like, God, why are you doing to me? Like, this is perfection, but that means I'm probably going to have to continue doing consulting just so that I'm sort of at the same level with expenses, salary level and income level. And anyway, so I am like, my heart is like, everything says yes, is screaming yes, literally, except that portion. And I leave the place, and I already know, like, if you feel like when the job is for you, it's like a boyfriend, everything, or a girlfriend, whatever, a partner, everything just falls into place, and the right person, I will say, it just falls into place. And I was like, I just knew that was going to be for me, and I knew everything went well, and I had interviewed well, and I connected with leadership, and I knew it was coming. But as I'm leaving the last interview, because they made me come like one more time just to check, right? Like, is this something we really want? And it was like the first time I met them in person. Anyway, so I leave that interview knowing that they're going to give me a job offer. And I'm just like, oh, everything is perfect. Like, and I ask at that point, I have really, strong prayers to angels, and Archangel Michael is really loud and has given me amazing messages. And so I asked, like, give me a message, like, just and I remember saying something like, make it make sense, like, make it make sense. Like, is this, give me a sign, make it make sense. Is this for me? And as I'm walking to the metro, literally, I see like something, almost like when you're in a movie and the movie slows down, you're in slow motion. I start seeing in front of me this feather that like starts falling like this, like, when the air, as they're falling through the air, and it's not falling obviously directly because it's a feather, and it's going zigzagging. And I put my hand like this, like in the air, and the feather falls literally in my hand, in the palm of my hand. And I was like, oh my God, I cannot deny. I literally cried. I think I was like, ah, and everybody's looking at me like, what is wrong? But in the city, everybody's crazy. So they probably were like, this crazy lady. And because I knew that was a clear sign, this is your job and it'll make sense. It won't make sense now, but it'll make sense to you. So long story short, in retrospective, what I can share is that job was amazing. It was an amazing job, an amazing opportunity. I learned so much. I was able to travel. I traveled like lots. I think Morocco, Brazil, Costa Rica. I went to Mexico, my home country, Mexico City. I ended up going like 7 or 8 times, I want to say, because I was helping with lots of administrative work, and then also I gained so much experience because I took over an organization in Mexico. Like, so, I mean, it was like, and, obviously the network, the people that I met in other countries, and, I'll say I reconcile myself a little bit with my country, because when I left, I was little. You hear Mexico City is really dangerous, and I really left with that mindset. And going back as an adult, working adult with very different circumstances for work, I saw Mexico City in a complete different, perspective. And I will say, and I'm going on a tangent, Mexico City is one of the top 20 best cities in the whole wide world for many reasons: food, culture, museums, you name it. And I actually doubt it. I was like, should I move here? Like, is this a place for me again? Like, anyway, so all that to say is that this position was amazing in every way that I could. I still had to do consulting, and I think that also aligned perfectly, like as in like the pieces of the puzzle just like fell into place. And but it made sense. But and throughout the position, I was like, make it make sense, even though I knew it had made sense. Like my guys would always say, like, just be patient, enjoy. And I ended up loving it. And then that position led me to where I am today. For the timing that it happened, how it ended was also perfectly, it was just so aligned with where I needed to be at this point, where I ended up moving to a different state, circumstances that like pushed me to be there. It all made sense. I mean, I can go on a little bit of a tangent professionally, but maybe this is a podcast for another time. But the time that I took this position really was sort of like the in-betweens, if that makes sense, that was going to take me to where I am now. And in the in-betweens are amazing. And I think this is why you cannot, be so ahead as I have the bad habit of doing, right? Like living in the future. My mom keeps telling me, you live in the future. And yes, my job's, I have to think ahead. I have to think 2 to 3 to 5 years ahead. But that goes you shouldn't apply that to your life every day. It was just amazing. And looking ahead, I mean, it was like, I just needed, and the sign was loud and clear. It makes sense now. You don't see it now, but you will see it later. And I ended up when I actually left that job and took this job, that is really truly the one of my dreams as well. I mean, things just get better because honestly, I think the harder that you work, it just the better that it gets, to be honest. Or not the harder, but the more that you believe in manifestation, the easier things get to you, and the cooler things get to your life if you truly are aligned with our manifestation. So it was that in between. It was an amazing in between, if you will, that wouldn't have happened if I had done it differently, obviously, but that led me truly was the step to where I am. Because had I been at a place in different circumstances, it would have not led me to where I am now. It would have been like a very different, and I know I'm speaking very vaguely or in vague terms, but all I know is that sign was like, trust it. And, no matter how many times, you get confirmation, and you have, you're spiritual, and you've received enough validation and confirmation to know that you need to trust, you still sometimes doubt. And this is why I'm recording this, and this is why I'm encouraging all of you to just have a little faith, and call it faith, call it hope, call it just curiosity, call it whatever. I don't know, just call it whatever, but have that, be receptive to just being open. Like, give me a sign, and you're gonna see that things are going to show, things are going to manifest, things are going to show up in your life. But you have to be ready to receive. And we'll talk about manifestation. I've done a few videos on social media that talk briefly about manifestation. And I think that the more that I learn and the more that I evolve spiritually, the more perspectives that I see, because we all, learn obviously at our pace and at the level of our own awareness. And I know that sounds obvious, but all that to say, my friends, ask for signs, and the universe is going to speak your language, right? For me, it was a lot of songs for some time until now that I'm more receptive and ready to hear in a more direct way. They don't necessarily show up that way. And I think universe also knows how to speak to you. I mean, I just said that, right? But it knows how to speak to you. It knows what's going to resonate with you, and it's going to put it in your path. Like, it's going to be really obvious. When it isn't obvious is when our egos, our insecurities, our rationale comes through, right? Because our brain cannot explain, how does that make sense, right? Like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't. And guess what? Our rationale, yes, we need it. Absolutely. I believe in science, all of that. Like, of course, we need it. We need it to survive. We need it to, get along with others, to get a job and all of that. But spirituality and that intuition that cannot be explained is infinitely more, it holds infinitely more wisdom than rational can. That's my opinion, and change my mind, and I'm ready. I'm open to hear that as well, for sure. But yes, ask for signs. And there's so many ways, right? Like, signs, the universe has different ways to speak to you, but also our loved ones who have passed, right? Like, to our dreams, which is going to be another episode. But the signs are there. Communication is constant, and communication is frequent and loud. But if you're not ready to hear, you're not ready to receive, we're not going to hear it. So be open, ask for signs, and be ready. Right? Be ready. And let me put it this way. If you are like, I don't know, I really doubt, and I'm a skeptic, right? Because I am surrounded by skeptics sometimes. And I'm just in awe sometimes in how the gymnastics they do when, like, intuition shows up or magic happens in their lives, and how they justify how that's not possible and try to, why rationalize it. If you can see something that you can't explain, just accept it. But I think, just ask for the sign, be open to receive, and just take it, right? Like, take it. Don't question it. It might not make sense at that point. It might not make sense right away, but it'll make sense. And be ready to receive some magic. Be ready to receive. Be ready to stay open and, be open-minded. And I think that's the key. When we block ourselves with prejudice or misconceptions, or not accepting magic, or not accepting that something that I don't understand can happen, it's when we ourselves block these messages. But messages are there. Messages are loud. They come from universe to guide us. They come from our loved ones. They come from our angels. They come from, many, many different places. And I'd say, if you are one of those skeptics and you don't know how to, I don't believe in that, I challenge you to ask for a sign that you want. So say, give me red elephants. I don't know, like, if I should do this, right? Like, ask your guides, or if you don't want to voice it out, just say, show me a red rose, right? Like, I don't know, I'm just saying red rose because there's one right behind me because it's my birthday month. But show me, I don't know, just say something, the most random thing you can think of. I don't know, una alebrije, which is like one of those animals that have different parts of different animals. I don't know, show me a blistic, whatever. I challenge you. Just ask for a sign and wait, right? Like, the universe has divine timing. Divine timing is key, and it'll come. I guarantee you it'll come, but you have to be open. So there you have it. I hope this resonates in the way that it has resonated with me. I hope it inspired you a little bit to be curious and to approach life from curiosity and from believing that magic can happen and believing that we are guided and that there is an infinite wisdom outside our belief system and beyond what we can understand and can explain. Be open to receive, my friend, because when that happens, boy, the universe will deliver. Anyway, that's all, my friends. Thank you so much for sticking all the way here. I hope something resonated, and I really do hope I get to hear from you and hear how signs have showed up in your life. I will also recommend maybe a few books because there's some amazing. Laura Lynn Jackson, I believe her name is. Oh my God, she has amazing books on signs. Especially, she's a medium, so she talks about signs from our loved ones, how to ask for those. It's amazing. So I'll put it on my website. Actually, there's a bibliography of some books. It needs to be updated. That reminds me. But and somebody just said, oh, that's a great idea. So I'm glad it's helpful for some. But I'll add some, and there are some there already. So if you're looking to get some suggestions, I suggest that you start there. And let me say something. When you ask like, hey, give me a sign, you could also say, hey, give me the book that I'm supposed to read, because that's a little game I have with my guides. Give me the book that I'm supposed to read, and I choose at random. And every single time it's as if the book was like written for me. Like sometimes even like phrases like I'm going on another tangent. I was reading a book and I asked for a sign, and I literally the book is talking about different people and stories, and they say my name, literally this lady Mariana who lives in Seattle. Was like, I screamed on the microphone. I'm sorry. I was walking with dogs and I'm wearing my headphones, and I went like, what? And of course I live in a crazy neighborhood, so it's not abnormal that people scream, but everybody looked at me like, and I was like, that's how clear the universe will deliver if you're ready to hear and be receptive to the messages. Anyway, my friends, thank you so much for sticking all the way here. I look forward to seeing you next month, and ask for a sign. I challenge you. Bye now.